Will Apple's watch really change wearable tech?
And can the government really stop pirates using VPNs? Welcome to Vertical Hold, the tech show where we channel surf through the headlines in search of the big picture. I'm Adam Turner, and I'm here with the man who geo-dodges so much he gets jet lag, Alex Kidman. Alex, what's new in tech?
HP has shown that it's not really happy with customers sneaking into its HBO Now service outside the US. Australian customers who are using VPNs and US iTunes vouchers have been sent notices indicating that HBO believes they're sneaking in and that they're going to cancel their service. It's not yet clear whether or not it's just specific VPNs. It certainly doesn't appear to be just the use of an Australian credit card that gets HBO Now noticing you.
Sony has lobbied US Netflix to crack down on Australian VPN users, accusing the streaming service of deliberately turning a blind eye in order to boost subscriber numbers, according to leaked internal mails from WikiLeaks. Meanwhile, Australia's Communications Minister Malcolm Turnbull continues to reject the VPN crackdown as part of the war on piracy.
As part of the ongoing net neutrality debate in the US, Netflix has indicated that it regrets signing the quota-free agreements that it has with Optus and iiNet in Australia. And it's indicated that it's not going to look to sign any future deals of this type. Optus, for its part, has weighed in on net neutrality, indicating that it could look at creating fast lanes of content for providers who are willing to pay a little bit more.
In 2017, Norway is set to become the first country in the world to scrap FM broadcasts in favour of digital radio. Unlike Australia, Norway's digital coverage already exceeds its FM coverage, although only half of Norwegian homes currently own a digital radio receiver.
So Adam, were you one of the people contacted by HBO Now for possibly sneaking into their service somehow?
No. Why would they want to contact me? I was actually surprised that they didn't contact me. I'm actually interested to know what's going on there because yes, I'm one of the many Australians who snuck in the HBO Now, and I've been checking my inbox quite frequently wanting to see this email that says we've busted your ass and we're locking you out, and I haven't seen it yet. Some people have and some people haven't, and we're still trying to pin down exactly what it is that's led them to detect that some people are coming from outside the US, but other people like me have managed to slip through.
It appears, there seems to be more of a tilt. What you might obviously think would be, the usual stuff like Australian credit cards, because they're fairly easy to detect. Not that having an Australian credit card is in of itself proof that you're not in the US. You could use an Australian credit card in the US quite legitimately, but
it would just look bad.
Yeah. That's the usual kind of easy idiot's way to spot this stuff. It appears that they're targeting specific VPNs, and their notice kind of seems to indicate this as well. And that could, of course, be a bit of a cat and mouse game because the VPNs are not going to want to give this up, are they?
But the VPNs will find workarounds, and they've always, like, Netflix has been in a bit of a cat and mouse game. They would block certain VPN providers, or they would block certain VPN providers' servers, and then if you spoke to the VPN provider, they'd actually hint, well, if you go over and log in via the Sacramento server, you might get in, or something like that. So it will be, but I don't think we've managed to pin down exactly which ones. Obviously, the geo-dodging service that I use isn't one they're looking at, or there's something else I've done differently. So eventually someone will pin down exactly what it is, and as you say, it's a cat and mouse game, but they'll never win. So Alex, the mailman's doing his rounds today, delivering Apple Watches. Is there one coming to your doorstep?
Not unless the mailman gets horribly, horribly confused. I opted this time out not to pre-order an Apple Watch, and I guess I should probably explain why. This is nothing against the Apple Watch. I think Apple's done some interesting things here within the wearable tech space, but the reality of all of this is that they were not first to market, and this is not a new position for Apple to be in. And I've already got a number of smartwatches that I can throw on my wrist that do the things that at this point in time I want a smartwatch to do.
But do you think that they'll do like what they did with MP3 players, where the iPod certainly wasn't the first MP3 player, but they seem to get a lot of things right and take a lot of pain points out of it, and that's why they did well? Do you think the Apple Watch can do things right that the others have struggled?
Yeah, to an extent, although I would say the iPod's probably not the best example of where I think they could win with the Apple Watch. It's part of it because the iPod was a fashion play. The real reason people wanted iPods was because it was cool to be seen to have an iPod specifically. And there is a certain amount of that with the Apple Watch as well. But I think the bigger thing, and it's what they did more with the iPhone, because they didn't invent the smartphone either.
Really? Say
No,
it's not
look,
so.
It happens to be true. They didn't invent it. But what they did do was they managed to get a core of developers to start producing really consumer-friendly apps in a really easy with a really easy method of consumption by people who wanted to buy them. I could have phrased that more cleanly, but you know what I mean. And nobody had really done that before. You could get apps for devices, but it was complicated, and they didn't transfer across things, and they were clunky. And the iPhone changed that, whether or not you like Apple or not. That's part of smartphone history. They seem to have done the same thing with the watch. They seem to have got that critical mass of developers, and maybe they do and maybe they don't, but they seem to have, at launch, done a bit more, gone a bit further than we've seen with Android Wear, than we've seen with Pebble. But again, having said that, I think the alternatives, if you're interested in this space, are well worth looking at. Apple's not the only one out there with colour, because there's numerous Apple Wear. Yeah, there's a slip.
He's been drinking the Kool-Aid, ladies and gentlemen.
Clearly I have. There's
With a shot of
numerous
vodka.
Android Wear watches out there that you can buy that have colour screens, a similar kind of battery life. In fact, depending on whose reviews you believe, they may have better battery life. If you want to spend even less, I'm a big fan of the Pebble, because it's a basic, simple, notifications-based device. It does what I need, and it lasts for about a week, which is awesome, and nobody else in a serious wearable watch does that. But
Now, this is what I was going to ask you. I know that you're a Pebble man. What would it take to win you away? Assuming people aren't going to wear more than one watch at a time for the best of both worlds. What's it going to take to get that Pebble off your wrist?
I'm a bit of a wearable tech freak, and it worries me that at some point I might actually do that. But I suppose the thing with the Apple Watch that does not entice me, and that did have me kind of thinking, oh, I'm not so sure, that really strikes a chord with me, is this issue of battery life. They've made it small and they've made it light, and it's a beautifully engineered thing. It is a really, really well-made device, but you're still talking single-day battery life, and that means if you don't charge it, it is just a hunk of metal on your wrist. And I'm OCD enough that I actually want a watch that will tell me what the time is almost no matter
All the time.
what. Yeah, it's this weird affliction that I have. So the battery life would probably have to improve a bit. I don't have a particular problem, oddly enough, and I know a lot of people do, with most of the pricing of this. It's priced premium because that's where Apple sits, but it's also priced as a fashion device, and I think that's the market that they're targeting, that nobody outside of maybe Motorola has really strongly pitched towards. This idea of, here is a fashionable device, that, especially one that you can have in multiple styles, because they're not just selling the watch, they're selling the individual different loop bands depending on which version you get. Now, you can take that to a silly extent. The top of the line Apple Watch in Australia, and it's only the smaller one, the 38, will run to the same price, give or take a few dollars, as a top of the line 88-inch LED TV. I did this analysis the other week, and it's the TV makes for a poor watch, and the watch makes for a poor TV. But that
doesn't do much for your back. Yeah,
that is a lot to spend on a watch, and again, that's a bit of a fashion and a market positioning statement for Apple, more than a desire to see people queuing up to lay down 24 grand on a watch. Although I'm very sure they'd be very happy to take your money.
What do you reckon they've got in mind in terms of upgrade cycles? They've managed to convince people to replace their phone every year or two, and that fits in nicely with mobile phone contracts. They seem to have even managed to convince people to replace their tablets every few years when there's less of a pricing incentive. How many people are going to be happy to bin their Apple Watch every 12 or 24 months to upgrade to the new one that has a better battery life or Bluetooth or whatever it is that they added the second one that they left out of the first one, which they always do?
Yeah, look, I think the watch does sit in a different kind of category. And I suppose some of it will come down to usage. There are certain features that this doesn't have that you could have. I'm a little bit surprised, for example, that they're selling something called a sports watch that isn't waterproof. That would seem like such a gimme. But seriously, for an Apple Watch 2...
It's the geek sports one. It's for watching sport.
But for an Apple Watch 2 sports version, I could see them adding waterproofing, and that might be a significant kind of uptick. But there are limitations to what you can do with the interface. There are limitations still, again, to what you can do with the batteries and the screens and so on that aren't as present in the phones and aren't as present in the tablets. And of course, there's also the fact that for a lot of people, they replace their phone or their tablet because they dropped it, because they broke the screen, because they bent it, because the buttons are wearing out. None of this stuff should, in theory, we don't know.
Oh, you wait. I'll give it about 10 minutes after the watches are delivered before we see the first I broke my Apple Watch story and the Ben Gate story. Even if it's, I had to drive over it with a tractor, those stories will come.
Yeah, but I'm going to put this out there. If you drive over your Apple Watch with a tractor, you're asking for trouble.
That's just poor design,
though. I know it's not
though.
specifically named, but yeah. I'm sure it is not covered by warranty. That's
it doesn't say not to fill it with washing up liquid.
Exactly. No, look, I mean, I agree. There will be the deliberate, let's see how far we can push this, and I'm sure, the people over at iFixit will grab one and melt it apart to look at what's inside that makes it tick. Terrible watch pun there, but those people aside, you wouldn't expect a watch to wear out in the same fashion.
Yeah.
And within that, I would say... Well, it wouldn't surprise me, in fact, if they stuck to maybe a 2-year upgrade cycle on this thing. Because within 2 years, they can then do a really big processor bump, because there have been some reports that depending on the apps you're running, it can get a little bit sluggish at times. On a smartwatch, that maybe doesn't matter so much, because you're not sitting there flicking between apps the way you do on your phone. You're using it for those simpler notification tasks. You're using it for that simpler health tracking kind of stuff, or reminding you to stand up. Those kind of details. So for a watch, they probably can sit on it for a bit longer. It might even sit in the same kind of space for upgrades as the Apple TV does, because they only upgrade that thing every couple of years because they only need to. So Adam, there's been a lot of talk about blocking VPNs or making them illegal, but I mean, is this really technically feasible? Is it advisable? And what's a VPN anyway?
Technically feasible, maybe. Advisable, probably not. A VPN is a virtual private network. In a nutshell, what it does is it creates a secure link from your computer or your phone or whatever device you're running it on out through your internet service provider to a server somewhere else. So think of it like a tunnel, and anything that goes through that tunnel, no one in between can see. So your internet service provider can see that you're using a VPN, but they've got no idea what you're doing.
All the traffic on it is encrypted.
All the traffic on it is encrypted. So they can see the tunnel, but they can't see what's inside it. Now, there are plenty of legitimate uses for using a VPN. A lot of business people use them to make a secure link back to their office, or if there's someone somewhere on a public Wi-Fi network and they're worried that the guy behind them might be tracking what they're doing, they turn on the VPN to make a secure connection out through the public Wi-Fi network to a remote server, so anyone on the network around them can see the tunnel but can't see into it.
In fact, a lot of businesses mandate that. If people
it's mandatory for a lot of people.
Use a VPN.
Yeah,
there's no ways about it.
You can't get into the systems if you're not using not just any VPN, but their preferred VPN. One of the side effects of using a VPN, though, is to the outside world, you no longer appear to be where you are. You appear to be at the other end of the tunnel where you popped up. So if you create a VPN and you connect to a server in California and then you go browsing the web, as far as all those websites are concerned, you're in California, you're not in Australia. And that's where the nice trick is for people who want to get around geo-blocking, because you turn on your VPN and Hulu goes, hey, come on in! What would you like to watch? Now, like I said, there's so many legitimate business uses for a VPN that it's just impractical to crack down on them. And Malcolm Turnbull has said there are plenty of news stories saying, oh, it might happen, and there are plenty of people calling for it, but the communications minister has enough sense to say, this is impractical, this is not going to work, this is not the way to approach this problem. Like I said, crackdown on the other end, crackdown on other things. I understand blocking websites and stuff at least makes some sense, but cracking down on VPNs is just ridiculous.
I think the blocking websites is making noise for the sake of making noise.
Oh yeah, it is.
This is the internet.
But the blocking VPNs is actually going to inconvenience legitimate business users.
This is true.
Of them.
No. But a lot of the arguments, I think, are fairly similar to the arguments around whether or not BitTorrent and similar protocols should be banned. Because the reality is that kind of peer-to-peer networking has plenty of legitimate uses, and even BitTorrent itself is struggling to kind of go legit BitTorrent
Yeah, but if
company
you
as
did an
distinct from the
honest
protocol.
survey of 100 BitTorrent users alongside an honest survey of 100...
99.999% of them are
Yeah.
downloading Game of Thrones episodes. Yes.
Yes.
I wouldn't doubt
Whereas
that.
if you do an honest survey of VPN users, at least half would be using, depending on the time of day and what they're doing, but at least half of them would have legitimate uses for that. What you're saying makes sense, but realistically, there are as many people using VPN for legitimate purposes, perhaps more, than there are for not so legitimate uses.
Well, that just about wraps it up for another episode of Vertical Hold. And if you've got a comment you'd like to add, hit us up on Twitter, add a YouTube comment or to our Facebook page, or just shout really loud and we might hear you.
Thanks for watching, and remember, if you like what you see, hit that subscribe button.